Hello everyone, and welcome to Chapter Book Storytime Variety Pack, where we listen to great stories. Some are old favorites and others are books that are new to EVPL and they might soon become your favorite. So welcome! I'm Ellen and I work at the EVPL Oakland branch, and I have two great books to share with you today. Before we get started, if you'd like to get some coloring pages, drawing paper, markers, crayons, I know that when I listen to books, it's nice for me to have something to keep my hands busy. I seem to listen better. I'm not sure why. So if you'd like to try that, you can stop the video, and then when you get all settled, you can start it back up again. If not, if you don't want to draw or color, you can sit back, find a comfy chair, and we'll get started. The first book I'm going to read to you today is called The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. A wonderful story, and it's available at EVPL as an ebook, a print book, an e-audiobook, and play-away. There are lots of ways to enjoy it, and all you need is your library card. This book is also known as historical fiction. That is, the author has set this book in the past, in London, England, in the year 1939. So we get to see how people lived back then, what was important to them, and how they react to these important historical events that are going to happen. The main character of the story is Ada, and I'm going to let her start telling the story. I'm going to be jumping around in the book from place to place, so there may be some breaks when I have to turn pages. Like now. Ada! Get back from that window! Mam's voice shouting. Mam's arm grabbing mine, yanking me so I toppled off my chair and fell hard to the floor. I was only saying hello to Stephen White. I knew better than to talk back, but sometimes my mouth was faster than my brain. I'd become a fighter that summer. Don't you be talking to nobody, Mam said. I let you look out that window out of the kindness of my heart. But I'll board it over if you go sticking your nose out, let alone talking to anyone. Jamie's out there, I mumbled. And why shouldn't he be? Mam said. He ain't a cripple, not like you. There are all kinds of wars, Ada says. This story I'm telling starts out 4 years ago at the beginning of the summer of 1939. England stood on the edge of another great war then, the war we're in the middle of now. Most people were afraid. I was 10 years old, though I didn't know my age at the time. Wait a minute. I'm going to stop. How do you not know how old you are? I think we're going to have to find out about that. And while I'd heard of Hitler, little bits and pieces and swear words that floated from the lane to my third-floor window, I wasn't the least concerned about him or any other war fought between nations. You'd think from what I've already told you that I was at war with my mother, but the first war, the one I waged in June, was between my brother and me. Jamie had a mop of dirt brown hair, the eyes of an angel, and the soul of an imp. Mam said he was 6 years old and would have to start school in the fall. Unlike me, he had strong legs and 2 sound feet on the ends of them. He used them to run away from me. I dreaded being alone. Our flat was one room on the 3rd floor above the pub, a restaurant or bar, where Mam worked nights. In the mornings, Mam slept late, and it was my job to get Jamie something to eat and keep him quiet until she was ready to wake up. Then Mam usually went out to shop or talk to women in the lane. Sometimes she took Jamie with her, but mostly not. In the evenings, Mam went to work, and I fed Jamie tea and sang to him and put him to sleep, and I'd been doing that for as long as I could remember. You might have noticed that Ada's Mam, her mom, calls Ada a cripple, and that she gets worried because Jamie can leave the apartment, but she doesn't. That's because Ada has a condition called Clubfoot. She was born with it. It's not her fault, but she can't leave the apartment. And here she describes what her foot looks like. My right foot was small and twisted so that the bottom pointed skyward, all the toes in the air, and what should have been the top touched the ground. The ankle didn't work right, of course, and it hurt whenever I put weight on it. So for most of my life, I never did. I was good at crawling. I didn't protest staying in one room, as long as it held both Jamie and me. But as Jamie grew older, he wanted to be with the other children playing in the street. "Why shouldn't he?" Ma'am said. "He's normal enough." To Jamie, she said, "You're not like Ada. You can go wherever you like." "He can't," I said. "He has to stay where I can see him." At first he did, but then he made friends with a gang of boys and went running out of sight all day. He came home with stories about the docks on the River Thames, where big ships unloaded cargo from around the world. He told me about trains and warehouses bigger than our whole block of flats. He'd seen St. Mary's, the church by whose bells I marked time. As the summer days grew longer, he stayed out later and later until he came home hours after Ma'am left. He was gone all the time, and Ma'am didn't care. I dreaded being alone. My room was a prison. I could hardly bear the heat and quiet and emptiness. I tried everything to make Jamie stay. She does. She tries some pretty mean things to get Jamie to stay. But then she realizes and says to him, "Pretty soon you'll be going to school anyhow," I said, astonished that I hadn't fully realized that before. "You'll be gone all day then, but I'll be okay. I'm going to fix things, so I'll be okay." I coaxed him into going out to play, and I waved at him from the window. Then I did what I should have done to start with. I taught myself to walk. If I could walk, maybe Ma'am wouldn't be so ashamed of me. Maybe we could disguise my cripple foot. Maybe I could leave the room and stay with Jamie, or at least go to him if he needed me. That's what happened, though not the way I thought it would. In the end, it was the combination of the two, the end of my little war against Jamie and the start of the big war, Hitler's war, that set me free. It's good that Jamie can go out wandering around and find out things and bring back news, because one day he comes back with some very, very important news. Jamie came home early looking upset. "Billy White says all the kids is leaving," he said. Billy White was Stephen White's little brother and Jamie's best friend. Ma'am was getting ready for work. "So they say." "What do you mean, leaving?" I asked. "Leaving London," Ma'am said, "on account of Hitler and his bombs." She looked up at Jamie, not me. "What they say is that the city is going to be bombed so that all the kids ought to be sent to the country, out of harm's way. I hadn't decided whether to send you." "Suppose I might. Cheaper. One less mouth to feed." "What bombs?" I asked. "What country?" Ma'am ignored me. Jamie slid onto a chair and swung his feet against the rungs. He looked very small. "Billy says they're leaving on Friday." That was 2 days from now. "His Ma'am's buying him all new clothes." Ma'am said, "I ain't got money for new clothes." "What about me?" My voice came out smaller than I'd liked. "Am I going? What about me?" Ma'am still didn't look at me. "Course not. They're sending kids to live with nice people. Who'd want you? Nobody, that's who. Nice people don't want to look at that foot." "I could stay with nasty people," I said. "Wouldn't be any different than living here." "None of your sass," she said. "You can't leave. You never will. You're stuck here, right here in this room, bombs or no." Jamie's face went pale. He opened his mouth to say something, but I shook my head at him, and he closed it again. When Ma'am left, he launched himself into my arms. "Don't worry," I said, rocking him. I didn't feel frightened. I felt grateful that I'd spent my summer the way I had. She means teaching herself to walk. "You find out where we have to go and what time we have to be there," I said. "We're leaving together, we are." And they did. Thank goodness she'd been teaching herself to walk all summer. But that Friday morning, very early before Ma'am wakes up, Ada takes her shoes and puts them on, and she and Jamie sneak away to the train station. And so Ada says, they get to the train station and they get on the train and the train starts to leave. And Ada says, "We've escaped. Ma'am, Hitler's bombs, my one-room prison, everything. Crazy or not, I was free." Just a minute, we interrupt this story for a bit of historical information. This is the significant event, the important event that happened in the history of Ada and Jamie's lives, but also in the history of London and the history of World War II. This really happened. Hitler, the leader of Germany, was taking his armies throughout Europe, attacking cities, taking over countries, and the people of London and the people of England knew it was only a matter of time before he would come to England. And so they wanted to be ready. And the people of London thought about the children. What's going to happen to our children? London was the biggest city in England at the time. It still is. And they wondered what would happen to all the children. So they got the idea, why don't we take all the children in London, or as many as we can, and take them out by train into the country? And families in the country will volunteer to take them in and keep them, and they'll stay there till the end of the war. And when it's safe, they can come back to their families. And that actually happened. Children were taken out to the country. And there were organizations that made sure that the children kept in contact with the families back home. But could you do that? Could you leave your family and go out to the country or go out somewhere and live with strangers? As a parent, I don't know if I'd want to do that, let my kids go out, even though I knew they would be safer. That would be really hard to do as a parent. And I think as a child, it would be pretty scary. So this is the important historic event we're talking about. It's part of World War II history, part of London's history. And now we get to see it through Ada and Jamie's eyes. So, back to the story. Imagine only living in one room for 10 years with only the view out the window, not going anywhere. How much she doesn't know, and how much of a surprise or a shock it must be to be out in the world. There are so many things she doesn't know, from the silly things like how to use a flush toilet, she never has, to what the countryside must look like and what things are all around her. The buildings ended, and suddenly there was green. Green everywhere. Bright, vibrant, astonishing green, floating into the air toward the blue, blue sky. I stared, mesmerized. "What's that?" "Grass," Jamie said. Grass? He knew about this green? There wasn't any grass on our lane, nor nothing like it I'd ever seen. I knew green from clothing or cabbages, not from fields. Jamie nodded. "It's on the ground, spiky stuff, but soft, not prickly. There's grass in the churchyard, round the headstones, and trees, like that one over there." He pointed out the window. Trees were tall and thin, like stalks of celery, only giant-sized, bursts of green on the top. "When were you in a churchyard?" I asked. What's a churchyard? I might have asked next. There was no end to the things I didn't know. Jamie shrugged. "St. Mary's, playing leapfrog on the tombstones. The rector chased us out." I watched the green until it started to blur. I'd been up half the night making sure we didn't oversleep, and now my eyelids began to settle, lower and lower, till Jamie whispered, "Ada! Ada, look!" A girl on a pony was racing the train. She was actually on top of the pony, sitting on its back, her legs hanging off each side. She held bits of string or something in her hands, and the strings were attached to the pony's head. And the girl was laughing, her face wide open with joy. And it was clear even to me that she was meant to be on that pony. She was directing the pony, telling it what to do, riding the pony. And the pony was running hard. I knew ponies from the lane, but I'd only seen them pulling carts. I hadn't known you could ride them. I hadn't known they could go so fast. The girl leaned forward against the pony's flying mane. Her lips moved as though she was shouting something. Her legs thumped the pony's sides, and the pony surged forward, faster. Brown legs flying, eyes bright. They ran alongside the train as it curved around the field. I saw a stone wall ahead of them. I gasped. They were going to hit it. They were going to be hurt. Why didn't she stop the pony? They jumped it. They jumped the stone wall and kept running while the train tracks turned away from their field. Suddenly, I could feel it. The running, the jump, the smoothness, the flying. I recognized it with my whole body, as though it was something I'd done 100 times before. Something I loved to do. I tapped the window. I'm going to do that, I said. Jamie laughed. Why not? I said to him. You walk pretty good, he said. I didn't even tell him that my foot hurt so bad I wasn't sure I'd ever walk again. Yes, I said, I do. So the world is opening up for Ada, and she's seeing things and learning things she never had before. But as she says at the beginning, there are all kinds of wars, and there are a lot more battles that she's going to fight. She has many questions, such as, where are they going to stay? Who will they stay with? Ma'am says nobody will want them. Is that true? Will Hitler begin dropping bombs? Will they be out in the country? What happens if Ma'am finds out where they are? But for right now, she feels free. And when she arrives at the house where she's going to stay, there's a pony in the backyard. So to find out if she gets to ride that pony and what else happens to her, take a look at The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. And there's a sequel called The War I Finally Won that kind of gives a hint of what's going to happen. But take a look. It's a wonderful book. My second book is a fantasy book, but it takes place in modern times. You'll recognize that right away. It's called Switched by Bruce Hale. Who's a good boy? Bruce Hale, you might recognize that name. He's written a lot of books for young people. When you were littler, you might have read Clark the Shark. Those are pretty funny books. And he also writes other series for older kids. For example, the Monster Town Mysteries. This is called The Curse of the Were Hyena. And then there's also the Underwear series. Not underwear, underwear. The Pirates of Underwear. As you can see, Bruce Hale has a really good sense of humor, kind of quirky, and you'll see it in this book. Switched. Let's read the jacket cover. Parker's life is about to get rough. 12-year-old Parker Pitts hates a mess. Ever since his grandmother died, he's much more comfortable when things are organized. He scrubs the kitchen counters at home, avoids the school bully at all costs, and never even speaks to Gabriella Cortez, the most interesting girl in the 6th grade. No muss, no fuss, no complicated feelings to worry about. But now Parker's older sister is traveling abroad for the semester, leaving behind her obnoxious and extremely disorderly golden doodle, Boof, for Parker to manage. Man's best friend? More like boy's worst nightmare. When an intense round of tug-of-war leaves both dog and boy with bumped heads, Parker and Boof wake up to the biggest disaster yet. They've switched bodies! Suddenly, Boof has to find his way through a school day, and Parker has to eat dog food. It's a mess of truly epic proportions. Can Parker and Boof clean it up? Together? Wow, this sounds like a great story. Oh, it can be nothing but a big mess. So Parker's trapped in a dog's body, but he still feels like a kid. And if you know dogs, they're pretty messy. They get into all kinds of messes. Just imagine. And yes, the author does go there. And Boof What's he going to do? How is he going to make sense of the human world? And what's he going to do when he discovers he has hands and opposable thumbs? Let's start reading. The chapters alternate. One chapter is Boof telling his side of the story, and then Parker takes the next chapter and describes what's going on as he learns how to be a dog. So I'm going to go to chapter 7, which is Parker's story, and he's going to tell what happens the day he goes to the dog park. It's called The Golden Growls. As the chapter starts, Boof in Parker's body just comes home and tells Parker in Boof's body what his first day at school as a human was like. "You what?" Parker demanded, after Boof had been dropped off at home and told him about his day at school. "Saw the principal," said Boof, 3 whole times. Over and over, Parker thumped his doggy head against the armchair. "Oh my gosh, I'm dead. I am so dead." "What's wrong with visiting the principal?" Boof shrugged. "There were cookies in the office." Parker's lip curled back. "It's a bad thing." "Cookies? Being sent to the principal. That's where troublemakers go." Boof frowned. "I'm a troublemaker?" "No, I am," said Parker. "That's what everyone will think now. Oh, I am so dead." Well, after a snack that leaves spaghetti noodles all over the kitchen floor, and Parker can't clean it up because he doesn't have any hands, Boof decides it's time to have some fun, and he's going to take Parker to the dog park. Parker had been there once or twice before with Billy and Boof, but never as a dog. The closer they came to the park, the slower Parker's steps grew. He could see as well as smell the dogs there. A miniature pinscher, a couple of pit bulls, a golden retriever, a Great Dane, a handful of mutts, and an enormous hairy thing he'd never learned the breed of. And he had no interest in meeting them. They'd probably gang up on him once they smelled that he was a fake. They'd probably bite him and give him rabies, and then he'd get sick and die. Or a fate even worse. Parker looked around for something to clean. Pausing with one hand on the gate, Boof glanced over at him. "Let's do it." Parker sat. "You go ahead. I'll watch." "You see, this is your whole problem." Boof strode over and grabbed Parker's collar. "You never have any fun." "Sure I do." Parker felt indignation rising like a hot steam from a volcanic vent. "I have fun all the time." "Don't I?" Boof tugged on the collar. "Watching the picture box with your mother and father doesn't count." Digging in his heels, Parker said, "I make things tidy. I organize. I read." Whatever that stuff is, it doesn't count either. Step by step, Boof muscled him over to the gate. "Hey, stop dragging me!" "What, and let you miss out?" said Boof. "Just because I don't want a bunch of strange dogs smelling my butt doesn't mean I don't enjoy life," said Parker. "You don't get it." Boof unlatched the gate. "I don't want to." Shaking his head, Boof said, "See, this is what it's all about. You gotta run around, sniff things, get muddy, eat something mysterious. Life is supposed to be fun." Shoving Parker through the fence, Boof cried, "Let's play." A couple of older women standing nearby chuckled. "Oh, the poor woofer," said one of them. "He's feeling shy." "I'm not shy," Parker barked at them, "and I'm not a dog." "Here, Poochie." The taller woman bent down, extending her hand with knuckles forward. Ignoring her, Parker spun around and made straight for the gate, but Boof blocked him. "Come on, you want to be a good dog, don't you?" "I don't want to be a dog at all." Parker jumped. Someone had jammed a cold, wet nose into his unprotected... Well, you know how dogs greet each other. That's what happened. It's a Great Dane, and she wants to play. "Let's chase her," said Boof. "Come on!" And with a whoop, he took off after the Great Dane. "Well, why not?" said Parker. And at that thought, his body leaped into action. He felt strong. He felt agile. His dog body had so much energy, he didn't know what to do with it. So he ran. The Dane led him on a merry chase up the gentle slope and back down again, blasting past the pit bulls and mutts, Boof whooped again, and Parker released a string of happy barks. A sense of wonder swept over him. This was fun. Parker felt like a weight had lifted off his shoulders. And then suddenly as it begun, the game ended. The Great Dane caught an intriguing scent from a bush and stopped on a dime to investigate. Boof and Parker stumbled to a halt. "Phew," said Boof. "I like that," said Parker. "Now what we really need is, scanning the park." Boof spotted the golden retriever loping toward them, chasing a tennis ball his owner had thrown. Before the dog could reach it, Boof darted over and scooped the ball off the grass. "Ha ha! I've got your ball!" Boof taunted with a sing-song tone. "Don't steal his," called Parker, but Boof danced away, holding his prize high as the retriever pursued, leaping after it. Parker edged a few steps closer. The dog's bark had a sharp edge to it, saying, "Give it! Give it!" And Parker could smell his frustration from 10 feet away. "Give him back the ball," Parker said. Instead, Boof dangled it just out of reach. "Oh, this? You want this? I don't have it." And he chucked the ball to Parker, who, without thinking, reared up and caught it in his mouth. The golden retriever wheeled on him with a savage glare. Uh-oh. Parker turned and fled. After a few steps, he glanced back and saw the other dog in hot pursuit. A mustard-furred mutt raised his head. Drawn to the fuss, it quickly joined the chase. "Go, boy, go!" cried Boof, trailing behind them. Hot adrenaline coursed through Parker's body like lava milkshakes. That wasn't fun anymore. The golden was drawing closer and closer, and the mutt trotted just behind him. Why wouldn't these dogs just leave him alone? In a flash, Parker realized that he still carried the stupid ball in his mouth. He spat it out and ducked around behind a tree trunk. But the retriever dodged the other way. He loomed before Parker, legs braced and fangs bared. "My ball," he snarled. Skidding to a stop, Parker yelped, "I don't have it!" The dog's eyes narrowed to slits. "I don't care." Well, Parker really is having an interesting first day in a dog's body, and it's going to get really messy. So to find out who wins this dog fight and figure out how they're going to get out of this mess, take a look at Switched by Bruce Hale. This has been Chapter Book Storytime Variety Pack. Thank you for joining us. If you're interested in more videos, you can go to our website, 𝑒VPL.org, or you can take a look at our YouTube channel, like and subscribe, or our Facebook page. You can connect to those from our website, 𝑒VPL.org. If you'd like to put a hold on either of the books that we read today, The War That Saved My Life or Switched, you can put a hold on them by calling your favorite EVPL branch or take a look at our website, 𝑒VPL.org, and search the catalog. Thank you so much for joining me. This was a great time, and I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Miss Jessica's next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.